Coming up in today's newscast, the manhunt for 13-year-old Sylvana Tsegai's alleged killer comes to a close. Israel builds closer ties to the Arab and Muslim world, and IAA archaeologists unearth an incredible 9,000-year-old find. Tesparan, the primary suspect in the murder of a young girl named Sylvana Tsegai, has finally been found after a two-day manhunt. The search ended last night when a member of the public identified him from photos in the media and immediately alerted the police. Cops then arrived at the Carmel market, where he was quickly caught and arrested. But just before his arrest, surveillance videos showed Tesfacion in a corner store buying some goods as if normal. Tsegai, the 13-year-old victim, was an Eritrean immigrant and was found beaten to death Monday night at home in her Tel Aviv apartment. Her body is now in the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute waiting for an autopsy, immediately after which she'll be flown back to Eritrea for burial. Initial results, though, already show signs of sexual assault and strangulation, which eventually led to her death. And according to reports from the welfare authorities, Tsegai was the victim of domestic violence as well. In fact, the 13-year-old called police just this past Saturday to complain about Tesfacion, who is her mother's ex-boyfriend, being in her house. Activists have pointed to this fact, though, to highlight the lack of initiative in solving or preventing these types of crime, especially as Tsegai's murder comes on the same day the world marked the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. Including Tsegai, domestic violence against women in Israel alone has claimed 24 lives since the beginning of the year. Following Chadian President Déby's historic visit to Israel earlier this week, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has now announced plans to return the courtesy by flying to the African nation of Chad, quote, within the coming weeks. Though an official date has not yet been set, this announcement again comes nearly 50 years since diplomatic relations between the two countries were severed. And while President Déby also made clear that his normalizing ties with Israel was independent of his criticisms regarding the Palestinian conflict, both he and Netanyahu still lauded all the benefits that their partnership will afford too. Further, in addition to partnerships in agriculture, medicine, and the economy, new deals between Israel and Chad are also widely expected to include weapons and military aid in the fight against terrorist groups like Boko Haram and the Islamic State. In fact, President Déby's delegation recently presented Israel with a long list of conditions for resuming diplomatic ties, chief among which are demands for weapons acquisitions and securities cooperations. What's worrying about this, however, is the supposed extreme aggression the Chadian delegation had with respect to these demands, and the fact that Déby's regime in Chad has often been likened to that of a dictatorship. Meretz leader Tamar Zandberg even brought this issue up in particular just as President Déby was first arriving. She said it should be of concern that Israeli arms might be sold, quote, to persecute political opponents, human rights activists, and journalists, and that President Déby is, quote, a despicable person who is responsible for the persecution of LGBT people, arresting journalists, arresting dissidents in the opposition, and more. Regardless, it would appear that Prime Minister Netanyahu is intent to going forward with these new relations. Additionally, according to Channel 10 News, normalizing with Chad is just one of many steps in gaining closer ties with other Muslim-majority states like Mali, Sudan, Niger, Oman, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and more. To that end, a secret meeting last year between an Israeli envoy and Sudanese officials in Istanbul, Turkey, has now been revealed, where the delegations discussed the establishing of ties. And there have been many meetings, both secret and not, between Israeli and Arab world leaders over just the past few months, including Netanyahu's trip to Oman and Culture Minister Regev's visit to Abu Dhabi. Joining me now in the studio with more on the ongoing efforts to build ties with African and Arab nations is Likud Knesset member Dr. Avraham Negusi, the chairman of the Caucus for African-Israeli Relations and the chairman of the Committee for Immigration, Absorption, and Diaspora Affairs, among many other titles. Knesset member, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so let's just start with Chad and the public relations between Israel and Chad. What are your initial reactions to President Déby's visit and Netanyahu's planned visit to go to Chad and the strengthening relations between these two countries?
Well, I welcomed this relationship because it is in the first time of coming to the Knesset, I established this caucus, and the Prime Minister came and inaugurates the caucus. The Prime Minister leads this a very wonderful diplomatic strategy for the best of Israel and the people of Israel, and of course also for the well-being of the people of Africa, because Israeli technologies are today saving millions of lives in Africa. The modern medical treatment and methods and the technologies are using Israeli doctors. and also the agriculture technologies, water, solar energy, and cyber, and all these technologies are really helping the world and helping also Israel.
So, all right. So, but what about some of the arguments? Say again, as I mentioned earlier, Meretz party leader Tamar Zandberg, who said, that maybe we shouldn't be working with countries like Chad, who has been accused of many horrific crimes against political dissidents and journalists and LGBT community, etc. Is arming or working with certain countries worth it? Does it kind of, do the ends justify the means?
Well, first of all, I think it is good that to have a dialogue with these people and talk to them, and then also importing the value of democracy for those countries if there is no democracies. But however, the member of Knesset, Zandberg, they used to say that Israel is isolated from the world. And now when the prime minister is leading and bringing Israel is one of the superpower of the world and unifying Israel's activities with other nations. And Israel is also sharing its knowledge and experiences to save life with other nations. Now she is coming again and complaining. So whatever the government do, the opposition always, they will have something to say. So I don't think we take it serious.
Okay, fair enough. So let's move back to Israel then for now. Right now we're looking at Netanyahu and a lot of the public diplomacy with foreign countries and a lot of the outreach to Arab countries like Oman and Bahrain and UAE, Saudi Arabia, etc. But what about, and in African countries as well, of course. So what about all the Ethiopians who are here in Israel and are those back in Addis Ababa and Gondar who are still waiting to be airlifted here, and the 40,000 some refugees and migrants who are asylum seekers here in Israel? Is our focus abroad when it should be at home?
Well, first of all, the Ethiopian Jew situation is different from the asylum seekers.
Of course.
Those who are waiting in Addis and in Gondar, the number is 8,000 of our brothers and sisters, which they have 80% of them, they have first-degree families here. The government has received unanimously a decision in 2015, and that decision is on implementing it every year in a small number, which I am not satisfied. The government's activity
this year is only
on
1,000,
this.
I think.
Yeah, last year they came 1,300 immigrated to Israel, and this year, just recently, the government decided to bring another 1,000, and the Ministry of Interior people are already in Ethiopia processing to bring those 1,000. I am not happy on that, how the government is treating this situation. We should bring all the 8,000 as soon as possible and reunite them with their parents, with their sons and daughters and brothers and sisters. So this is our community, this is our brothers and sisters, undivided member of our communities. Now, on your question about the 40,000 asylum seekers, the government is working to solve this problem with dialogue and cooperation with those people. The Ministry of Interior is dealing with situation. This issue is not discussed with my community, since my committee is Immigration, Absorption, Diaspora Affairs, not asylum seekers.
All right. Well, Knesset member Dr. Neguse, thank you so much for coming in. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you come back soon. Thanks for sharing your insights again.
Welcome.
All right, beginning Wednesday, November 28th, the United Nations is now observing the 40th Annual International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. But unlike what the title may actually suggest, the occasion actually marks the adoption of Resolution 181 in 1947, calling for a partition of the land into two states. However, practically every speaker and presenter so far has only used the occasion to demonize and bash Israel. Speakers like General Assembly President Espinosa, for example, who didn't mention Israel or the two-state solution a single time throughout her speech, focusing only on the plight of the Palestinians under occupation. Or like Dato Muhammad Sharul Ikram Yaqub, the vice chair of the Special Committee to investigate Israeli practices affecting the human rights of the Palestinian people and other Arabs of the occupied territories. As his very specific title would suggest, Yacob's speech included multiple harsh condemnations of Israel's alleged use of excessive force, settlement expansion, and collective punishments as cause for the Palestinian suffering. But again, not once did he condemn Hamas or other terrorist groups for war crimes like hiding behind human shields, holding bodies of soldiers and live civilians captive, and firing thousands of rockets and incendiary devices indiscriminately at civilian targets. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh also sent in a letter asking for the international community to end the occupation as well, but perhaps most alarming out of all the speakers was when CNN political commentator and Temple University professor Mark Lamont Hill said there should be a, quote, free Palestine from the river to the sea, end quote, seemingly calling for violence against Israel right there at the UN. From the river to the sea references the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, aka all of Israel proper and the PA, and it is a common phrase used to call for the destruction of Israel. Only United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres seemed interested in peace and two states, calling on both Israeli practices and terrorist Palestinian actions to be halted immediately. He said only constructive negotiations in good faith towards a two-state option will bring the desired long-lasting solution. Containing the situation is not sufficient. Meanwhile, as the international community called for peace and a calming of tensions, 4 individuals were wounded in a series of explosions in the Gaza Strip in what Hamas is calling a work accident. But the explosions come from the Buwaj refugee camp, where one of the highest concentration of incendiary devices sent into Israel have originated. Now, for all you sports fans out there, listen up, because what if I told you that there's a platform that can customize and personalize short videos for each and every fan automatically and in real time? For example, you want to see the highlights of LeBron's season? Done. How about clips from the last Pistons game? Boom. In seconds, WSC Sports AI platform can create it. And here with us with more is the co-founder and CEO of WSC Sports, Daniel Schichman. Daniel, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, tell me a little bit about WSC, how it works, and kind of how you came up with that.
Yeah, so we're 4 friends, founders, very good friends for more than 19 years, and we wanted to create a platform that can change the way fans consume sports. So we created a platform that can automatically and in real time generate personalized and customized sports content for every fan on every digital platform. And the aim is to help sports media right owners such as leagues, broadcasters, or publishers to create customized content, provide better experience for their fans, and monetize their content.
So, okay, so then you sell this to providers then, to content providers, or is this, maybe there's an app version of this that the Joe Schmo at home can download and then get cool clips?
So our customers to begin with are the leagues, broadcasters, and publishers who own the media rights, and they're trying to provide the best experience. Some of them are using it for their internal tools so they can create content for their social media, for the website, for their apps, for sponsors, and some of them really open it to the fans and enable every fan to go and ask for any type of content they want, and the system generates something personalized for every fan according to their preference.
How does it do that then?
So the system basically gets the live stream of the game and then analyzes the game in real time. There is video analysis, audio analysis, data analysis. At the first stage, it understands what happens in each and every second of the competition.
Wow.
So every dunk, every touchdown, every home run is automatically identified, gets the perfect start and end point, and also
So,
rating
who
and
did
ranking.
it, what players were involved.
And even how interesting the event is.
Wow.
So after we have everything broken down and we do it on thousands of games per year, then comes the second step of the system understanding what's interesting and automatically creating the right story. So the best player, highlights of the half, highlights of the week by a specific player. It can send by Omri Caspi highlights to the Israeli broadcaster. So any repurposing of the video is being done by our platform.
So it watches the content, it tags it, it says this is interesting, this is Omri Caspi, this is whoever, and then at the end of the day, some guy, a fan, or the broadcaster says, I want to create a clip of this, and then the system already has it all cataloged?
Exactly. It's cataloged, it's creating the right story, adding graphics, adding overlay, even publishes it to the social media right away in real time.
All right, so how do we sign up for this service is, I think, the next question.
So I think one option is to go for the NBA, for example, which is a key customer. You can go to their Facebook page and through the bot, ask whatever you want to see. And any other sports customer we have, like the MLS, the PGA, Cricket Australia, and all over the world, just tune into their website, app, social media, consume the content, and they're already users of our platform.
Incredible. All right, well, Daniel, thank you so much for telling us about this, because this sounds so cool, and I imagine the people who aren't into sports are going to start watching sports for this. So thank you so much for coming in. WSC Sports, check it out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, it's been 30 days since the Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue shooting, and one of the victims, who was shot and wounded in the attack, has finally been released from the hospital. 70-year-old Daniel Ledger, who was shot in the chest, was also one of the few shooting victims that did make it out alive that day. 61-year-old Andrea Wedner was released from hospital earlier this month as well after being shot in the arm. Her 97-year-old mother was killed in the attack, however, and 4 Pittsburgh police and SWAT members still remain hospitalized from wounds sustained in the shooting. Thankfully, they're all listed as being in stable condition, though. Now, in related news, in the wake of this shooting and many other similar anti-Semitic and religiously motivated attacks, a serious division has formed around a singular question. Should federal dollars be used in the protection of religious institutions? Many conservative organizations say yes, and have long been lobbying for government security grants like the American Nonprofit Organizations Against Terrorism Act, which legalizes federal grants to be used for protection in religious spaces, and more. But other groups, especially along the lines of protecting the separations of church and state, say no, like the Anti-Defamation League, that in fact said they would never, quote, support directing taxpayer dollars in the form of government grants to religious institutions for any purpose, including for security purposes, end quote. Instead, the ADL, the Jewish Federations of North America, and the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations all came together to support the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, a law that requires law enforcement agencies to regularly assess threats and train police units to identify and prevent scenarios like what happened in Pittsburgh, just never in the form of direct payments to religious institutions. Moving on, media company Netflix has exploded worldwide with their amazing range of titles across nearly all genres and languages. But a new report has found that in Netflix's eyes, not all customers are the same. CompareTech surveyed 78 out of 190 countries in which Netflix's online media services are available. And among other things, they compared the monthly price of a basic plan against the number of titles available in that region. TV's Doriel Mizrahi is here now to tell us where Israel stands. So Doriel, where do we stand?
Okay, Aaron. So Israel is 13th on the list. We have around 4,900 titles.
All right.
Okay, and Israel pays more. Obviously, that's not surprising. More than like Canada, the US, and the UK. But overall, 13 is not that bad on a list of 78.
Yeah, I was going to say, 13th it's not great, but it's not bad. It also means that we are 65 places cheaper than everybody else.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, so, what are some of these calculations? How does CompareTech figure this out, and what are some of the other things that they found out?
Okay, yeah. So what they took, the way they found out that, they took the titles from each country, titles meaning movies or TV shows and stuff like that, and then compared it to the cost of what each country pays. And another thing they actually checked is, let's say, okay, they took the average wage, and then they took how much people pay for subscriptions, and they wanted to compare the two and see how much people would pay per each country's wages.
Oh, so not just like the bang for your buck in terms of how many titles for the subscription cost, but also how expensive that cost is to the individual.
And to the country, in the country they live in.
Okay, so and where do we sit with that?
Okay, so Israel is 1/5 of a percentage of their average annual wage. So
1/5% of the Israelis' wage, of the average Israeli wage, would go to Netflix. 1/5%.
And the most cost-effective country, surprisingly, is Canada. They have like 5,500 titles. Okay. And versus, let's say, Denmark was last on the list with 3,500 titles. So we're somewhere really good in between.
Okay, but then again, that's against the first one, the average wage as well. Yeah, that was titles versus cost. But then also in terms of the wage, like Denmark is also scoring last in terms of how expensive it is.
Okay, no. The cheapest one is Brazil at $5.24, but they also don't get as much as obviously Canada or us.
Sure.
And then, okay, so Canada is the place to go if you want to go watch all the Netflix that you want to watch.
All right,
Definitely.
and if I wanna watch Netflix's Canadian titles, I can just do that.
You can do that. There's this thing called a VPN.
Virtual private network.
Exactly. And there's some VPNs that allow you to get into certain countries' Netflix, not all of them, so you just have to check before. But if you really want to go there, Canada's the way. And if you ever travel to Switzerland, you don't want to pay for Netflix there. It's like $12. So we're good in Israel, in the middle. We're good here.
All right. Doriel, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Aaron.
Right. In a jaw-dropping discovery, a rare 9,000-year-old stone mask has just been unearthed in the hills of Hebron in the southern West Bank. And dating back to the cultures of the Neolithic or New Stone Age period, the mask is one of just 15 others like it in the world.
It is a very, very exciting find for an archaeologist to hold in his hand. It's not common at all.
According to archaeologist Ronit Lupu, the mask was, quote, worn by people as part of rituals surrounding ancestor worship, end quote. And she continued to say that finding a mask at, quote, such a high level of finish is very exciting.
It's made out of stone. It was polished, and as you can see, it is perfect. It has cheeks and nose and the eyes. Everything is very carefully made.
The mask was made of pink and yellow limestone and resembles a human face, and Lupu explains further that the 4 holes drilled at the edges of the mask were possibly used to tie the mask to a pole or even a person's face. Dr. Omri Barzilai, head of the IAA Archaeological Research Department, also commented on the find, saying that, quote, stone masks are linked to the agricultural revolution, end quote. That and that the fact that the masks can be traced to a specific archaeological site can help researchers understand the culture that it was produced in. Barzilai and Lupu will present their findings today at the Israel Prehistoric Society's annual meeting, which will be held at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And now, of course, it's time for this week's Top 5 with ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh.
Israel is known as the startup nation, but what some people may not realize is that there are hundreds of extremely successful businesses in the United States that are run by Israelis. So I'm here to give you guys ILTV's top 5 list of Israelis that are heads of U.S. businesses. First on the list is the Power Ranger himself, Chaim Saban. Chaim is best known for creating the children's action series, The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Go, go, Power Rangers!
Which debuted in 1993 and became one of the longest-running children's action series and was turned into 3 movies. Saban sold the Power Rangers franchise rights in a $522 million deal, and it doesn't end there. Saban Entertainment and Fox Kids merged to form the Fox Family Channel, which was acquired by Disney in 2001 for $5.2 billion. And there are just so many other ventures to name. Second up is Adam Newman. Born in the city of Beersheva, Newman was raised on a kibbutz, which helped him adapt the communal principles of a kibbutz to a corporate office, which led him to co-found WeWork in 2010. The fast-growing company provides community, workspace, and services to over 200,000 members in 77 cities in 23 countries. WeWork is now reportedly valued at over $20 billion. Newman helped change the way we work for the rest of time. Third on the list is designer Eli Tahari. Born near Jerusalem, Tahari immigrated to the States with less than $100 in his pocket, and now his name is on the labels of clothes, shoes, sunglasses, and accessories sold in more than 600 stores in 40 countries. Tahari was even honored with the Ellis Island Medal of Honor back in 2014 as a tribute to immigrants who made a significant contribution to the U.S., and you know, it's needless to say his designs are unbelievable. Fourth up is Adi Tatalko, the CEO of Houses, founded back in 2009, is an incredibly successful home remodeling and design platform. Houses attracts over 40 million unique monthly users in 15 countries and was valued at around $4 billion, making Tatalko one of the wealthiest women in the States. Go check out the Houses website and app to create your perfect home. You go, girl. Last but definitely not least is the gorgeous Noa Tishby. Tishby is considered to be the woman who paved the way for future Israelis in the Hollywood world. Tishby started her career as an actress, singer, and model, and was in shows like NCIS, CSI Miami, and Nip and Tuck. But best of all, Tishby's own Noah's Ark production company broke new grounds by selling the first Israeli TV show to be remade as an American series in treatment to HBO. She even went on to introduce additional Israeli TV projects to HBO and MTV. She's gorgeous, she's talented, business savvy, and a huge role model for Israeli girls. That's all for today's Top 5. Back to you.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. In honor of our latest startup guest, WSC Sports, our word today is kadur'af or volleyball. A kadur'af or volleyball game usually consists of 2 teams of up to 6 players each, and the objective is to land the ball on the ground of your opponent's side of the court. Well, there's also a net involved and, of course, volleying, which explains why kadur'af can also translate to a flying ball. Now, finally, Israel is a very popular place for beach volleyball or kadur'af, and there's rarely a day that you won't see a kadur'af game in progress while walking along the boardwalks. So if you ever want to play, don't be shy, just hop in. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear and cool with a low of about 60 or 16 degrees Celsius, and then over the weekend, you can expect scattered rainstorms and a slight drop in temperatures to a high of around 58 or 14 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.71 shekels to the American dollar. And remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.